Questions, Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just to be fair and in the spirit of cooperation, last day before the legislature rises, I'm going to give the Minister for Opportunities in New Brunswick one final chance to get up and tell us if she's had the opportunity to walk down to the head office in King Street of ONB and ask for the annual report.
The Honourable Minister of Opportunities, New Brunswick.
Hey. Monsieur le Président, c'est avec grand plaisir que je me lève aujourd'hui en Chambre pour répondre une dernière fois aux membres de l'opposition que le rapport annuel de Opportunité Nouveau-Brunswick sera déposé, comme tous les rapports annuels qui sont déposés par les corporations de la Couronne d'ici la fin juillet, et que les états financiers audités, vérifiés, une fois que les états financiers seront vérifiés, un rapport final sera présenté dès l'automne. Et j'aimerais rappeler à cette Chambre que Opportunité Nouveau-Brunswick, c'est le premier point de contact pour les entreprises du Nouveau-Brunswick, pour les entrepreneurs de chez nous. Ils sont partout à travers la province. Ils ont des points de contact partout à travers la province. Ils font également de l'excellent travail pour créer des emplois, pour aider nos entreprises à créer des emplois, à exporter davantage. Et c'est pourquoi nous avons annoncé récemment plein d'entreprises qui, justement, ont créé des emplois chez nous.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's nice that the Premier allowed the Minister to get up and answer that question after so many times being asked, and it's good that the Minister finally found her speaking notes on that particular topic. You know, I was surprised that the Premier didn't get up and talk about select committees this morning, and because it's been in the news and on their minds here lately. But you know, Mr. Speaker, when you look at things such as the select committee required under the Act to renew the Commissioner of Insurance Advocate and the Conflict Commissioner that expired in June, there's been no mention of that at all. So I'd like to ask the Premier, why have you not complied with the Act and created a select committee on those particular items?
The Honourable Premier.
Les fonctionnaires, les commissaires de l'Assemblée législative sont en train de faire le travail. Nous avons des personnes qui remplissent les responsabilités de les places qui sont vacantes. Évidemment, nous voulions regarder si c'était possible de trouver des efficacités à l'intérieur de ces bureaux. On avait dit ça, ça fait quelques mois déjà, Monsieur le Président. Alors, lorsque nous serons dans une place d'être capable d'instaurer des mesures qui vont nous aider à trouver des efficacités, nous allons procéder à remplir les places vacantes, Monsieur le Président. Pour moi, ce qui est important aujourd'hui, c'est de voir que le chef de l'opposition veut parler des comités. Je trouve ça encore très surprenant que l'opposition n'est pas prête à participer dans un processus non partisan avec nous, dans un processus où nous donnerons la majorité aux députés de l'opposition et le troisième parti, où on va discuter d'un sujet très important qui est la réforme électorale. Alors j'espère que le chef de l'opposition va nous confirmer qu'ils vont participer aujourd'hui.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, I would remind the Premier that the majority would lie with the leader of the Green Party, and who's already talked about that in the media. But Mr. Speaker, again, if the members opposite would reach out and try to have a conversation about this, as opposed to trying to beat us over the head here in the legislature and try to embarrass us, where I've said all along that there's options that would allow this to go forward, and the committee across the way, the members across the way, don't seem to want to be respectful of that at all. And I guess it comes down to why we're here on July 8th, that the new rules that were put in place for this House have not worked. We've had the fewest sitting days, the fewest number of bills, the most bills retracted or sent to law amendments. Mr. Speaker, either the Premier has to admit that his calendar is more important than doing the work of the legislature, or the rules that they put in place for the legislature just don't work. Which is it?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, a few things have been made clear with the statements of the Leader of the Opposition. So his real issue with the steering committee, with the committee that we're trying to put in place of the legislature to discuss electoral reform, is that the member from Fredericton South, the Leader of the Green Party, would have a substantial vote in that process. Clearly, that's his issue, Mr. Speaker. He's right. The majority will not be with the opposition. The majority will not be with the government. The majority will have to be two political parties that would be agreeing with the reforms that they would put forward. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that's fantastic, and actually I think that's a definition of nonpartisan, Mr. Speaker. So it's very unfortunate to see that the Leader of the Opposition and the Conservatives refuse to work with other political parties. And we have made a structure in which two of the three political parties would have to be in agreement with any of the recommendations that would be put forward. We would do this after an extensive time of consulting with New Brunswickers, and we'll have a good, nonpartisan discussion. So join the table is what I say to the opposition.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, the Premier knows very well that once the committee report is done, it goes back to the government to make the decisions on what it is, and we've seen the results of the rules changes here in the legislature based on the rules that they put into place in LAC. And there was no discussion, there was just a steamroller approach to here's the rules. And even in the statements this morning, where the House Leader could have come to us and said, we want to have an extended statement for a very, very important issue. But no, they just came to the House and have a sense of entitlement that everyone will just go along with what they do. And Mr. Speaker, this is the way that we think the House should run, is that there could be meetings, and Mr. Speaker, even you could get together with us and the House leaders and come up to a solution on problems like this that, again, instead of being sprung to us at the last minute. So will the Premier admit the rules that they put in place do not serve the people of the well here in the House of the Legislature?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition is clearly excited because there was an article in one of the newspapers regarding the sitting days, which I actually thought the article was very helpful. Unfortunately, it didn't make the connection within the article, so I'll make it here today. The fact that they talked about the sitting days, the amount of sitting days from January 1st to the end of May, and pointed out that in New Brunswick there was 20 sitting days during that time period, and the average was 30 across the country. Well, I think that's very helpful. Unfortunately, they didn't finish the sentence, in my opinion, where they should have added that we now have to add a +8 to the sitting days in New Brunswick, because we just went from June 28th to today. So 8 other days that we have come to have question period, Mr. Speaker, which brings us up to 28, which is right in line with the average across the country. So, Mr. Speaker, our rules, the rules that have been put forward are helping democracy. They're allowing us to have more scrutiny in committee. They're allowing to have question period. And they're allowing us to discuss the priorities of New Brunswickers, the economy, education, and health care, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, the proof's in the pudding when we look at this government. We pointed out the rules of the House haven't been working. The Premier's schedule takes a priority over it, and that's evident here today. We've seen the results of a number of their committees that they put forward. We've seen the SRP that was really just a guise to increase the HST. We've seen the Education Committee that, again, was supposed to be an all-partisan, and again, it was put back to the government after 2 meetings of the all-committee. And we look at the Shale Gas Committee again that went back to the government after a considerable amount of work, and the government just had the status quo. So time and time again we've seen this government have the guise of saying, well, we want to work with everybody, yet it's ultimately up to them at their decision. We're also in the middle of the Climate Change Committee, which is very, very important, but our concern is that that's just a guise to add a carbon tax to the people here in the province of New Brunswick that are already overtaxed. So, Mr. Speaker, will the Premier tell us, is he going to change the rules of the House to allow good debate and work...
Time, Leader. The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, the comments of the Leader of the Opposition has made it clear what their issue is. And I'll quote what the Leader of the Opposition said to one of the newspapers, Mr. Speaker. We've had fewer sitting days, and we're stuck here in July. We dispute that we've had fewer sitting days. Mr. Speaker, 20 sitting days from January 1st to the end of May. We've just added 8 more. 28 really brings us with the average across the country. But we see in this sentence what the real issue is. It's that the opposition thinks that they're stuck here in July. So, Mr. Speaker, for the government, we don't mind working during the summer, Mr. Speaker. We don't mind coming to the legislature, even if it's nice out, maybe if it's warm in here, but we don't mind to come and pass a free tuition bill that will help those that need it most, Mr. Speaker. We don't mind giving a rebate, the most generous in Atlantic Canada, to low-income and middle-class families, Mr. Speaker. Unfortunately, the opposition does.
Leader of the official opposition.
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, it's the Premier's agenda that stuck. It was the Premier's agenda that was stuck. It was the government that couldn't get their agenda done, so they had to come in with a heavy-handed motion of closure, limited debate and closure. That's how they get things done in here. They use their majority to steamroll the opposition. That's what they do. And Mr. Speaker, the Premier is on record of saying that he was gracious enough to give us another 2 more weeks to debate. But Mr. Speaker, the reality, the fact of the matter is, he would have been happier to just jet set around the country and go to various fundraisers and fund runs and get his agenda above the legislative democracy. So if his agenda was so important, why did you back off of the bill on the Judiciary Act? Did you get a call from Ottawa and Dominic said back that off?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not the one that said this here. This is printed black on white, the Leader of the Opposition saying and complaining to the people of New Brunswick that he is stuck here in July. Those are his words, Mr. Speaker. For a guy that has been a politician for quite some time, I think he would recognize that people of New Brunswick expect us to work 12 months of the year, Mr. Speaker. You would think, as somebody who has been a minister in the government, in the former government, he would understand if we're going to move our province forward, if we're going to grow the economy, if we're going to create jobs, if we're going to improve education, if we're going to improve health care, we have to work 24/7, 12 months of the year, Mr. Speaker. So for him to have the audacity to lecture us, Mr. Speaker, on what we're trying to do for the province and move the province forward, and then he complained that he's here in July, I think, Mr. Speaker, that he has done a great disservice to the Conservative Party. I think he has clearly shown the priorities of the opposition is out of whack with New Brunswickers.
Leader of the official opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the only thing that's out of whack is the Premier's perception of reality. We were here in May ready to go to work. We were here in June ready to go to work. But we're here in July. If you don't think we're ready to go to
Order.
Lift your motion on closure. Lift your motion on closure. Rescind it and let's go to work. Put your money where your mouth is. Come on, lift your motion. If you don't think we're ready to work, lift your motion on closure, and let's come back next week and get it done. So again, Mr. Speaker, if the Premier was so set on getting his agenda done, why, at the expense of the Deputy Premier's reputation, did he withdraw the bill that was so contentious with the judiciary? Mr. Speaker, did the Premier get a call from Ottawa of the House Leader?
The Honourable Premier.
No. Don't change the subject, Mr. Speaker. You're ready to work, sure, in May, Mr. Speaker, but not in July. They're stuck here in July, Mr. Speaker. And he has the audacity to get up on his feet now. They all have the audacity to get up on their feet now, Mr. Speaker, and pretend that they want to stay here. They came to us weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, saying that if we pulled the free tuition bill, that we would have been out of here by last Friday, Mr. Speaker. That's when they wanted to leave. They did not want to be here, stuck in July, as they said, Mr. Speaker, in quotation marks. Well, for us, we're not stuck here in July. We are happy to be here in July to give the largest, most generous rebate to low-income and middle-class families with the HST rebate, Mr. Speaker. We're happy to be here in July to give the Women's Council the independence that they need, Mr. Speaker. And we're happy to be here in July to pass the free tuition bill, giving low-income families, middle-class families, hope for the education they deserve.
Leader of the official opposition.
Well, Mr. Premier, Mr. Speaker, please tell the Premier that he doesn't have to yell to make his point. Many times he's chastised us here in the legislature, and now he's taken that on himself. You talk about cooperation. Yes, we went to the government and said we want to cooperate because we know that there's things to take care of in the riding, and we know that there was an opportunity to get work done in May and June. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is we want to make improvements to the TAB bill. We want to make improvements that this government ignored. Choice to students. Choice of institutions beyond a limited 5. Mr. Speaker, there's 55 private institutions that students cannot choose under the TAB. So we want to make improvements. If the Premier wants to work July, remove the closure bill, and let's get back to work.
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, il ne peut pas changer ses mots maintenant. Il les a dit hier. C'est clair qu'est-ce qu'il a dit. Il a dit que pour eux, ils étaient stuck here in July, Monsieur le Président. C'est ça que le chef de l'opposition a dit. C'est pas moi qui dit ça. C'est pas moi qui a dit ça. Il a dit ça à travers des médias, puis ça a été imprimé, Monsieur le Président. Et il a raison. Et c'est vrai que je suis en train de m'exciter peut-être un peu trop, Monsieur le Président, mais je suis excité. Et je suis excité du fait que nous sommes en train de passer un projet de loi qui va donner des frais de scolarité gratuitement à ceux et celles qui ont plus besoin dans la province. Et je suis excité qu'on va donner un rabais, le rabais le plus généreux qu'il n'y a pas dans les provinces de l'Atlantique aux familles qui l'ont plus besoin, Monsieur le Président. Et je suis très fier et excité du fait que nous allons faire en sorte que le Forum pour avancer la cause féminine ici dans la province va être indépendante sous notre gouvernement au lieu d'être coupé comme ce l'était sous leur gouvernement, Monsieur le Président. So I am excited to be here in July to make sure that we continue to advance the province, grow the economy, and make it the best place to live, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm glad I excite the Premier so much. Mr. Speaker, if he's so excited about being here in July, why doesn't he remove the limited debate and closure and come back next week? Mr. Speaker, the Premier stuck on a few words. Well, if he's stuck on a few words that I said, why don't we look at a few words that he said? 5,000 jobs in the first mandate. Sorry, 5,000 jobs in the first year. 10,000 in the first mandate. That's what the Premier said. I offered him to have a do-over because the Confederation Council, their outlook was for 1,600 jobs. Now all of a sudden there's a whole new light for the Premier. When he talks about what he says and what he does, two different things. So now he's saying he wants to work in July. We want to cooperate too. We've made that obvious. Mr. Speaker, if that's the case, have the Premier pull the closure motion and let's get back to work next week.
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I think the people of New Brunswick see right through the stunts of the opposition. On the Friday, Mr. Speaker, in which we have agreed to pass the bills here on the government side, to pass the bills that will improve the quality of life of New Brunswickers, and we did so by taking away some bills so we could make sure that the opposition felt that they had enough time to debate these important bills that we're going to pass today. They had the audacity to get up the last day and say, oh yeah, we want to stay here longer. But Mr. Speaker, their actions and words say more than that. They say the truth, Mr. Speaker, and the truth is they feel they're stuck here in July. The Leader of the Opposition said that yesterday. They're stuck here in July. And Mr. Speaker, their actions of asking us to pull the free tuition bill so we could be out of here by last Friday speaks louder than words. They're now trying to pretend it was to improve the bill. No, Mr. Speaker, they did not want the free tuition bill to be enacted for this September. Well, I can guarantee the people of New Brunswick that we're passing it today, and those that need the most support will have the free tuition bill to back them up.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, again, Mr. Speaker, we see the Premier being very selective in the choice of words here today. And when he says that we agreed to pass the bills, Mr. Speaker, they brought in a closure motion. Right. They brought in a limited debate and closure motion. Yeah. It's in Hansard. It's on the tape. The Premier can't deny it. It's in the paper. It's in the media. So, Mr. Speaker, when the Premier stands up and says, oh, you know, it's all the opposition's fault, we came to you and wanted to cooperate. Yeah. We came to you to help. And what happened? We were routinely rejected. We went with a number of ways to improve the TAB tuition, talking about the $25 million that the government took out They took out 50, put some in, and there's still a huge amount of money that they've taken away from post-secondary education, training, and labor. We're going to make some amendments here today that will improve the tab. And I'm asking the members opposite, if they want to make that bill better, then why don't they vote for the amendments that we're going to bring up that would include private universities and have a sliding scale?
The Honourable Premier.
You know, one day the Leader of the Opposition will no longer be a politician. He'll go and read Hansard and watch the videos of his speeches, and he'll see the discrepancies. At the beginning, he's talking about us. He's accusing us of not cooperating enough. So he's pretending now, on the last day of the legislature, that they want to stay longer. He's bringing in amendments now to an important bill, Mr. Speaker, on the last day of the legislature. Never told us about it, of course. Mr. Speaker, the opposition is saying that things are on Hansard and on video. Well, guess what? We're Stuck Here in July is also now captured forevermore. So the truth came out yesterday. I get it. The Leader of the Opposition's tired. He's been doing question period. He's been in the legislature. Order. It's hot in here. It's summertime. I get it. And in a slip of the tongue, he told the truth and said that they feel that they're stuck here in July. Well, Mr. Speaker, that demonstrates that everything else that they've been doing has been trying to score political points. But don't worry. We want to be here in July to pass the free tuition bill.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
You know, Mr. Speaker, one day soon, the member across the way won't be Premier. And for some people, that can't come quick enough. You know, we've seen a government that promised jobs, 5,000 in the first year, 10,000 in the mandate. We've seen that. That's on tape. That's on Hansard. And the Premier will look at that and go, why did I make that foolish, rash, brash promise to get elected? And now the reality of the day is setting in. The unemployment rate here in New Brunswick is above 10% now, 10.3%. And based on the things and the decisions that this government has made that's driven jobs and economy investment out of New Brunswick. We can look at a number of things. Higher taxes. HST was a job killer. Mr. Speaker, will the Premier go to work and reduce the high unemployment here in the province?
The Honourable Premier.
Monsieur le Président, c'est malheureux parce que clairement le chef de l'opposition veut concentrer sur les choses négatives. Est-ce que le taux de chômage est trop élevé dans la province? Absolument, et on va travailler très fort, jour après jour, pour essayer d'aider ceux et celles qui cherchent de l'emploi, Monsieur le Président. Mais on a eu une croissance de nombre d'emplois ici dans la province lors du dernier mois. Alors ça, c'est positif et c'est malheureux que le chef de l'opposition ne veut pas concentrer là-dessus. Le chef de l'opposition veut parler un peu des montants d'emplois qui ont été créés par notre gouvernement. Je vais certainement, Monsieur le Président, je m'excuse, ça va prendre probablement 2-3 réponses maintenant parce qu'il faut que j'énumère tous les emplois qui ont été créés. So we had Clean Harbors Energy and Industrial Services Corporation in St. John with 15 jobs created. Advanced Helicore in Dieppe, 30 jobs. Trevally Mining Group in Bathurst, 89 jobs, Mr. Speaker. Vilco Limited in St. John, 40 jobs. Ocean Group in Boc-à-Raquette, 75 jobs. Cooperators General Insurance Company, 70 jobs in Moncton. 130 jobs, Mr. Speaker, with Nordia. 80 jobs with Air Canada in St. John. 1,000 jobs at BMM in
Leader of the Third Party. Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, this is great sport. High entertainment value this morning, but I have some questions. Mr. Speaker, last month, Prime Minister Trudeau spoke at a virtual town hall on the Aboriginal People's Television Network. And he was talking about the importance of protecting Indigenous languages, some of which are extremely endangered. He described Indigenous languages, any language, as an indicator of pride and identity, belonging, and culture. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Wolastoqiyik language is among the most endangered in the country. Immediate action must be taken to preserve this language for the Maliseet, as most of those who speak it fluently are now well over 60 years old. Will the Premier of the province take leadership on this issue to ensure that the Wolastoqiyik language does not lose, that they do not lose their language forever?
The Honourable Minister responsible for Aboriginal Affairs.
Minister opposite, thank you very much for the question. We've worked very closely with both Mi'kmaq and the Maliseet and the Woolastoq First Nations on developing programs to preserve their language and their culture. As a matter of fact, there are some wonderful innovative ideas in terms of developing games so that children of these two wonderful First Nations can develop interactive opportunities to learn the language. As all of us know very, very well, once the language is lost, your culture is lost, and I'm very, very happy that the relationship that we have with our First Nations communities in terms of our discussions and attending powwows and attending national meetings and the preservation of the language of the Woolastoq people is paramount in our agenda.
Leader of the third party.
Mr. Speaker, the people, the Woolastoq people, are on the verge of losing their language. A proposal was submitted to this government several months ago on behalf of the chiefs of the communities calling for an emergency project to establish an immersion program at the preschool level. The intention was that it would be ready to implement this fall. Unfortunately, nothing has yet come to fruition, meaning that another year will come and go, and the Woolastoq elders, fluent in their own tongue, will turn another year older. Will the Premier intervene to see that this project is fast-tracked so that the Woolastoq preschoolers will begin learning their own language this fall?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, I'm honoured to be able to stand here today and say that we are moving forward with preservation of language, with Mi'kmaq and Wolastoq language development. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to inform the House that we have introductory, intermediate language courses in Mi'kmaq and Wolastoq have been developed, and an in-person and online introductory courses have been also implemented. Also, Mr. Speaker, the intermediate in-person course will be implemented in the near future, and also, Mr. Speaker, online intermediate courses will be implemented in 2017. So we're making some strides in this, Mr. Speaker, and we want to make sure we do the best thing for our people here in New Brunswick. Thank you.
Leader of the third party.
Mr. Speaker, toddlers and preschoolers can't go online and learn a language that way. New Brunswick, Mr. Speaker, has been seen for many as a leader on language rights due to our constitutional protection of both official languages. More than any other province, we understand and value the intimate connection between language and culture. Mr. David Leach, a Toronto-based lawyer, is preparing a constitutional challenge that argues Aboriginal people have a right to be taught in their own language. Let's not wait for the courts to mandate policy on this. We have the opportunity now to reassert ourselves as the leaders of linguistic rights in this country, Mr. Speaker. Will the Premier establish a working group now to outline a plan of action that will restore and revitalize Indigenous languages in our province?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I said earlier in my previous answer to the question, is that our department takes a great pride in being able to work with our First Nations communities. Mr. Speaker, we, as I said, with the online courses and working with the officials at the Department of Education, we're working with our First Nations community to be able to make sure we can help these communities preserve their language. It is very important. We also, too, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to say that, you know, we had made record investments in our education throughout the whole province. We're working with our First Nations communities along with the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs. We have very good relationships throughout the province. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to inform the member opposite that we are making some headway on this here, and we want to continue to help and make sure we have the preservation of those languages. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I know the time is running out here in question period, but I just, you know, some of the comments that the Premier made need to be corrected. When he talks about creating jobs in the province of New Brunswick, he needs to balance that with the jobs he's forced out of the province of New Brunswick. Mr. Speaker, we were at Sussex not too long ago when a group of businesses that included Steve Moffat Enterprises, Elantra, Amsterdam Inns, we're talking about how they've suffered business because of the moratorium on shale gas here in the province. And we came, and the businesses came with a solution that would address that. And there was even a solution to the wastewater issues. The companies down there are able to solve the problem of wastewater, but this government sits on its thumbs and does nothing on that. Why is the Premier driving jobs out and not taking advice such as a regional moratorium on shale gas here in the province of New Brunswick?
The Honourable Premier.
You would think the member opposite, when he was in government, would have taken the time to fully understand the process. It's not about treatment, Mr. Speaker. It's also about disposal. So I don't know. Again, I've asked this question in the legislature. I've never gotten an answer. Does that mean that the Leader of the Opposition is saying that Riverview is ready to take the disposal water? And, Mr. Speaker, I think it's very important to take the time to point out that I will not have enough time today to be able to go through the over a thousand jobs that have been signed with ONB over the last few months, Mr. Speaker. And look, the Canadian economy is not going as well as we would all like, Mr. Speaker, but we had a 1.9% increase to our economy, which is the largest since 2010. And in New Brunswick, Mr. Speaker, since June of last year, we've had an extra 1,000 jobs, a net gain of 1,000 jobs, and in the last month, a net gain of 1,200 jobs. The people of New Brunswick, the entrepreneurs and the businesses believe in our province. They are working hard, and Mr. Speaker, they are making it happen, growing our economy and creating opportunity for all.
Opposition House Leader.